All right, so today's screencast is going to be primarily covering the endocrine system. What you see on this particular slide is an overview of where the glands are located on the diagram to the left. And it also tells you really what the function is and maybe what part of the brain is responsible for stimulating that part of the gland. The endocrine system is different from the nervous system in that it's the body's slow chemical communication system. The reason why it's slower is because communication is carried out by hormones, which take a while to be secreted into the bloodstream and for the effects to be felt by the person. So hormones are defined as chemicals synthesized by the endocrine glands that are secreted in the bloodstream. Hormones, we know, affect the brain and many other body tissues, and as a result change behavior, change our feelings, change our mood, and really can affect a person's well-being. For example, epinephrine, which is the same thing as adrenaline, it increases our heart rate, blood pressure, blood sugar, feelings of excitement during emergency situations. The pituitary gland is one of the most influential glands. That's why it's given the name the master gland. And the pituitary gland secretes many different hormones, some of which affect other glands. That's why it's kind of referred to as the most important or influential gland in the endocrine system. The thyroid and the parathyroid regulate metabolism and calcium levels. They're located in the neck. The adrenal glands consist of the adrenal medulla and the cortex. The medulla secretes hormones, epinephrine, norepinephrine, during stressful and emotional situations, while the adrenal cortex regulates salt and carbohydrate metabolism. I would say the most important thing you have to remember about the adrenal glands is the release of adrenaline and how it also puts your body in a heightened state. The gonads are the sex glands, and they're located obviously in different places in men and women, and they regulate body development. They maintain the reproductive organs in adults. Here, you're going to see a picture of the brain, and you see a section of the cerebral cortex that has been removed. The term associated with this is lesion. And lesion is intentionally destroying different parts of the brain tissue, and we do this in order to study the effects. So a lot of times in animals, scientists will lesion a part of the brain in an animal to see how it affects their behavior, and then we transfer that information and apply it to human behavior. It's really interesting how far we've come in the last 10 to 20 years in terms of understanding the brain and behavior and how they're so interconnected. There's a lot of research being done. You can see on this particular slide, this woman is actually in a brain bank. In this, you can see in the tubs, there are thousands of brains that have been cataloged, and it's interesting to study how damaged brains compare to healthy brains and what the effects are. So the next few slides, you're going to take a look at some of the brain imaging techniques that are used. The first one here is an EEG. This is an amplified recording of electrical waves sweeping across the brain surface. And you can see in the little girl, she's got little electrodes that are placed on her scalp. And we'll talk about the EEG quite a bit in Chapter 7 when we talk about states of consciousness, and we look at brainwave activity and how it differs depending on what stage of sleep we're in versus 1, 2, 3, 4, or REM sleep. But it's simply an amplified recording of the electrical waves. If you see the acronym EEG, the E stands for electrical. It's the electroencephalogram. That should hopefully help you remember. The PET scan, the positron emission tomography, is a display of the brain after radioactive glucose has been injected. If they put the person through the PET scan, they can actually see where the active regions are in the brain when performing a given task. So they might while the person is in the PET scan, have them do some problem solving or create situations where anger might be the emotion they're evoking or being scared, and they can look and see where in the brain the active regions are located. I always try and make a mnemonic device. I think of just the word PET, and I think about how PET's like sugar, PET's like glucose. So if you see any kind of question dealing with glucose, you hopefully remember that it's related to the PET scan. Another scan that's on here is the MRI. Now this is probably the scan that most of you, if you've gotten a brain imaging scan, have had. It stands for magnetic resonance imaging. So they use magnetic waves to generate images. If you're looking at anatomy and you're looking at structure, you're going to want to have an MRI. It can actually show you the anatomy of what it is that you're trying to look at. And you can see in the top two pictures of this slide, the one on the left is a picture of a healthy brain. You see the red arrow. If you compare it to the brain on the right, which is a schizophrenic brain, the area where the red arrow is pointing to is way larger. And they have found, using MRIs, that schizophrenic brains have larger fluid-filled regions of the cerebral cortex. So that's one way they can look at anatomy to do a diagnosis. Another vocab term you guys have to be familiar with is the fMRI. The F preceding MRI stands for functional. So functional magnetic resonance imaging. The picture on the bottom is showing you a picture of an fMRI, which still shows the anatomy, but the F part of the brain imaging scan shows blood flow. So if you want to look at anatomy, but you also want to look at active regions, this particular machine will do both. And so the example given in the book is having a person who's in an MRI scan look at a series of cards, and if they're asked to be deceitful or lying, then it shows what active regions in the brain are actually being used when you lie or are deceitful. And that is where we end this screencast.